So good morning, everybody. We're going to be talking to you shortly, giving a Microsoft Azure overview, but we're just waiting another couple of minutes for people to join the call. We've got a few more people registered than are actually on at the moment, so if you wouldn't mind just waiting for 2 more minutes and then I will make a start. So, good morning, everybody. Thank you for your patience. We're going to get started now. So, my name is Mark Wilson, and I'm here to talk to you this morning and give an overview of Microsoft Azure. So, over the next hour or so, I'm going to give a short introduction to Visual, talk about the objectives of this session. I'm going to introduce you to Azure and run through some of the key services on offer. And there's a spoiler here. It's not just about virtual machines. There's far, far, far more that we can talk about that you can use in Azure. And I want to help you to understand how to exploit Azure as part of your digital transformation. We will have time for questions and answers at the end of the session, but if anything comes up as you go through, I think you're all on mute at the moment, but Molly will collate the questions and replay them to me at the end. So if you've got any questions that you want to ask through the chat window in Skype, please do, and we'll come back to them. So just by way of an introduction, so you know who the voice is at the end of the Skype call, my name's Mark Wilson and I'm one of the architects at Visual. My role is pretty varied, actually. It's one of the things I like about being here. But I typically get involved in the early stages, helping to scope and define requirements, to drive strategy, to provide some advisory services, really, as well as leading some of the larger programs of work that we get involved in. And really what I try to do is step away from the solution, have a look at the business goals and objectives, and then try to map Microsoft technology onto these to drive out some business outcomes. And that perhaps makes a little bit more sense if I tell you who Visual are and what we do. Now, some of you may already be familiar with us, and I should say thank you very much for giving up your time to join us this morning. What I'm not going to do is spend an hour talking to you about Visual, but I do want to just set the scene and explain what we're about. So at our heart, we are a Microsoft consultancy organization, consultancy and services. So this slide that I'm showing you now, and the picture quality is not brilliant, but it was taken from the audience at the Worldwide Partner Conference last year. And you can see Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, talking about digital transformation and about engaging customers, empowering employees, optimizing operations, and transforming products. And our directors were pretty pleased to see this, because this is how we've gone to market for the last 4 years. We've always led with transformation, and we have 3 core transformational offers around engaging, empowering, and enhancing. So connected business is around surfacing information to people at the right time so that they can take actions. It's about insights and engagement. end user computing, workforce empowerment, giving people a flexible work style, allowing them to work wherever and whenever they need to. And an optimized service vision is about enhancing the infrastructure, the operations, the processes, the way that everything sits in the back office, but it's essentially the data center elements. So, you know, as you can see, those three are very complementary. They do bleed into one another. But that's how we have been going to market for some time now, and we were very pleased to see Microsoft's digital transformation agenda being so close to ours. So, a little bit about Visual, about our business. We have grown through consulting into services, and we now do skills and solutions. And let me explain what that is. Our consulting business is split into two groups. We have the business group, which provides advisory services around strategic consulting, engagement management, architecture. That's where I sit in our company. We have a number of technical consulting practices split into two more groups. Cloud platform is primarily about providing that platform, implementing the Microsoft technologies that will allow you to build. And then cloud productivity is about driving out some value on top of that platform. And when we split that out further, you can see that we've actually got 6 individual technical practices, and we pride ourselves on having expertise within each of those. We've got an enormous breadth across the 6, but it does mean that we have the depth within them as well. So you know, our people are experts rather than generalists. If we move on to services, we provide managed service solutions. We can do a full managed service, you know, and pretty much an outsource, but we can also provide proactive and reactive support services, and it really doesn't matter whether that's on premises, in the cloud, or hosted. And then skills is, I think, something quite unique to Visual. We were having problems recruiting and retaining the right caliber of staff. And so our directors decided to do something about that. We formed a partnership with one of the local colleges. We set up an apprenticeship program, and that's grown. We now have regional academies in 10 colleges across the country. We're looking to expand that, so there'll be one in every local education partnership, and we work with other employers to help them to place young people in further education so that they can get a Microsoft-based qualification, and it also helps them into the workplace. And it helps us in terms of getting really good, high-quality young people as the next generation of IT workers. Finally, on there you'll see solutions across the bottom, and we've got a number of software solutions now that build on top of the Microsoft stack and provide some additional value. And of course, we'd be very happy to talk to you about those, but this call is probably not the call. So, just looking in a bit more detail about our consulting practices. I highlighted the 3 groups that they were in. You know, this is the business group. So we cover engagement management, business analysis, and architecture. So that's the strategy, the governance, the definition of value, and efficient and strategic delivery. Cloud platform covers technology foundations, the data platform for insight and intelligence, and about collaboration across any device within the unified communications and messaging practice. And then we have cloud productivity, which is our application development capability, our business productivity team, who are all about driving personal and team productivity out of those collaboration tools, whether that's SharePoint, Yammer, Teams, or you know, what it may be. And CRM is perhaps badly worded on here because we've grown past Dynamics CRM now. It's Dynamics 365, but still it's about supporting business process and quality and execution. On the managed services side, I'm just going to build this slide out and just highlight that we follow ITIL practices, as you would expect. We have a service desk based here in Stafford. We have an incident management capability. We have our core services team, and then that's backed up by service delivery, who are not just managing the quality of that service, but also looking at continual service improvement. And as I mentioned, we can offer everything from premium support right through to a full managed service. It's all based on a needs assessment, which we would do when we first engage with you, and then obviously that service delivery function means that we can fine-tune as we go along and make sure that our support services meet your needs. So that's the visual advert over. Hope it helps you to understand who we are. And I really want to get into the meat of this session and talk about now what it is that we're going to do. So we're going to look at how organizations can use Azure to hopefully drive out some cost reductions, certainly to facilitate some faster innovation. We won't just be looking at infrastructure, we're going to look at platform services as well, or advanced workloads as I prefer to refer to them, and we're going to highlight some of the potential that Azure has to help your business adapt and change in a changing world. So the first question is, what is Azure? And you've probably got some different ideas from different Microsoft presentations, different people you've talked to, perhaps even from talking to some of our consultants. You know, is it a catalyst for innovation? Is it about a virtual data center in the cloud? Is it a modern development environment? Is it a digital transformation enabler? Or is it just Microsoft's cloud platform? And it's kind of all of those things. Sometimes Microsoft will show you this, and you go, oh my word, that's an awful lot of icons on a page. It's not a very good way of describing Azure, but the point is it's actually a collection of around about 70 services at the moment, growing by the day, and it's not a single thing, it's a brand that's applied to a whole suite of Microsoft's cloud products. And rather than looking at it in terms of platform services and infrastructure services and breaking it out with these various icons for the various things that we can subscribe to, I prefer to think of it in terms of solutions, and indeed Microsoft are changing along these lines. They have this page, there's a link at the bottom of the slide there, that goes to a solutions page where you can see solutions for instance, microservices applications, or predictive maintenance, or development and test. In fact, there's more on the website than are on that slide. When I checked this morning, there's things like blockchain, there's gaming, there's SAP on Azure, hybrid integration, business software as a service apps, big data and analytics, data warehousing, and the list goes on. But I'm going to step away from Azure for a moment, just look at cloud computing in general. And this diagram has been used for years now. You may have seen other people present it. The key point on this slide is that you run your services on premises, you are responsible for absolutely everything. All of those grey boxes, from applications at the top through to networking at the bottom, that's the scope of your management. And that management means that you invest a lot of time and effort in keeping the lights on. So as we move across towards the right, you find that with infrastructure as a service, somebody else is managing hardware for you, and right up to the virtualization layer, but you're still looking after the operating system and above. With platform as a service, then really you're doing even less. You're consuming runtimes and just bringing the applications and the data. And with software as a service, then pretty much everything is there. You might just make a few tweaks around a configuration, but it's managed for you from the provider. And what that means is that we have a continuum, if you like, with full control on the left, but probably also the highest cost, and efficiency and savings on the right. So generally, when we're looking today to pick an application service, then we'd be looking at, is there a SaaS product that can fulfill this need? And if there's not, then okay, what can we build on the platform? But sometimes we need that control, or those skills drive us back towards virtual machines and even back on premises. And we'll talk about how the Microsoft Cloud can span all of these things. But really, Azure sits in the middle here, covering the IaaS and PaaS bits. But as I said, I don't really like to refer to its platform as a service. It's far more than that. It's advanced workloads. This slide is kind of another way of looking at things. So if you want to build something from the ground up, you want to build your own solution or service from scratch, that's one approach. often you'll look to take existing services as a starting point, and you'll do some additional configuration to really customize it to make it fit your business. And sometimes you're fortunate enough to find a solution which is just ready for you to move in. You can use it immediately with minimal configuration. So that's where our infrastructure, platform, and software as a service overlays onto this. This is where we say, what is a service? But this slide is the money slide, really. It's talking about value to the business. So in the early days of cloud, we were focusing on moving infrastructure from on-premises to Azure. And we got some efficiency, just as when on-premises we went from individual physical service to a virtualized infrastructure. There's some efficiency there to be gained, but after a while that sort of flattens off, and it's like, okay, well, that's the normal, and we're not really driving any more value to the business out of this. Infrastructure for most businesses isn't what drives value. The real opportunity in the cloud is about a platform for innovation. So about IT becoming a business enabler. It allows us to take risks and in a controlled manner, so that we no longer have to invest heavily and take time to build out infrastructure. We can use platform resources, and if it works, we roll it out. If it doesn't, then we turn it off. It really means that we can go to much more quickly. And then if you look at that in terms of digital transformation, we've got new business models today, and we our businesses have to change and adapt. So if we look at movie distribution, we have movie distribution without cinemas now. We have taxis without cars. We have telephone calls without physical networks. And we have hotel rooms without hotels. I would add Amazon and say that they have no stores, but they do now. Mind you, Uber's got cars. But you get the point. Blockbuster could have been Netflix, even YouTube, but they didn't transform. And ultimately, that led to their failure. Does anybody remember Our Price Records or Borders Bookshop? These are all examples of businesses that failed to move with the times. And really, the point is that software has radically transformed business models, and every company is now a software company. So building on cloud platforms allows you to move with, or ideally ahead of, your market. So coming back to what is Azure, well, Azure is Microsoft's cloud platform. It enables customers to reduce costs by migrating workloads and to innovate faster by using a cloud-first platform. That's Azure in a sentence, but I want to add two more words to that. Global and hyperscale. Now, hyperscale might sound like a marketing term, but really what it means is two abilities: the ability to fail over around the world and the ability to provide advanced workloads. And as for global, well, that's the next slide. So we can see that Azure is offered from 32 regions across the world, with 6 more announced. And Microsoft's invested here in the UK. They have 2 data center regions in the UK, whereas the competition, Amazon, now have 1 in the southeast of England. Microsoft's able to provide some data center redundancy there, sort of between different regions in different parts of the UK. And the reason that they've invested in the UK is that we are number 2 worldwide and number 1 in Europe for cloud adoption. So it made a lot of sense to build out their capability in the UK. As you can see, you've got all those other regions. So if you're a global organization, then you might be providing services from different geographies to put them close to your users. But all of that gives flexibility in a way that you build and design and create a fault tolerance within your cloud architecture. So I'm going to talk about Azure in terms of 4 topics. I'm going to talk about application innovation, migrating existing workloads, going cloud first and mobile first, innovating faster and reducing risk. I'm going to talk about data and intelligence, so using the power of SQL in the cloud, unlocking the opportunity that's there in latent data, which is data which doesn't have any business intelligence around it. democratizing artificial intelligence, enabling anybody to use it, from business analysts to developers, looking at new models, chatbots in support, etc. I'm going to look at openness and flexibility, so that we embrace heterogeneity. We use tools that the developers are most happy with. And I'm going to talk about trust, because you trust that you run your own data centers and your own servers in a particular way that allows you to meet your obligations. And you need to know that whoever that you work with to provide public cloud services is able to protect your business data in the way that you would, and actually probably beyond where you can, because of the resources that they have on offer to them. So just one slide before I go into those 4 points to just set the scene, some Azure concepts. So Microsoft Online Services, you'll hear us talking about this concept of a tenant. And a tenant is quite abstract, really, but it goes across all the services that we consume, whether that's Dynamics 365, whether that's Office 365, whether that's Azure. And then there's a common identity platform within a tenant, which is provided by Azure Active Directory. Then if we look at Azure, there's a whole bunch of Azure services that we can consume, and we can break those out into subscriptions. And the reason we do that is for management purposes, perhaps for billing and invoicing. And there's also things that we can do around tagging of resources that helps with the reporting. But we can break out subscriptions within Azure, so we can subdivide our Azure services. And the other Microsoft Online services, well, they'll share that directory which also provides the security behind Azure's role-based access control is used for 365 products as well. So that hopefully just hopes to get some language straight. So if I use terms like tenant or subscription through this presentation, then you'll understand what I mean by that. I want to move on quickly to talk about application innovation. I want to talk about building quickly and failing fast. That whole point that I made about you being able to invest for a relatively small amount of money in some cloud services that let you to try things out that would have just been too expensive to go out and build, and too time consuming to go out and build in your own infrastructure. So in Azure, we've got two mechanisms for deploying resources, and there's something called the classic model. In the past, we would have used something called Azure Service Manager. It's built around cloud services, and it goes back to the early days of Azure, when Azure only did platform as a service. And it's what's called programmatic infrastructure deployment. So if we want to deploy infrastructure or other services into Azure, then we write scripts and say, dear Azure, here's a list of everything I'd like you to do in excruciating detail, and it will run in serial. So even if you're working in a GUI, you'll kick off a process and you'll be waiting and waiting and waiting, and then you can kick off the next process when that's ended. For the last couple of years, we've had a much better way of working with Azure Resource Manager. And this is a templated approach, so it's what we call a declarative end state deployment. It allows us to do infrastructure as code. And those templates effectively say, Azure, here's what I want my environment to look like. Go and make it happen, please. And the important thing is that the resource manager knows the dependencies, so it can deploy things in parallel. If a resource isn't present, it'll be created. If a resource is present and has a different configuration, it will be adjusted. And if a resource is present and correctly configured, it will be used. And a resource, just to explain what I mean by that, it could be a virtual network card, it could be some storage, it could be a virtual machine container, it could be any number of those things that we deploy in Azure. The point is, it lets us get to a world of desired state configuration. And what we're really gaming with ARM is the ability to unlock that hyperscale capability so that we can expand very easily as large as we need to go, and to contract as well, so we can cope with demand peaks. But ultimately what we get is infrastructure as code, which then lets us integrate more easily with business processes, and that helps us with things like DevOps practices. Now, I'm not going to talk about DevOps in detail today, but I'm quite happy to have another conversation with people about that. But DevOps fits very tightly into the Azure Resource Manager model. So, looking at my, I think I've got 2 or 3 slides on infrastructure as a service, and then we'll talk about advanced workloads. But infrastructure as a service isn't an Azure offer, so you won't say, oh, I want to buy IaaS, but what you'll buy is you'll buy compute, you'll buy storage, you'll buy networking. And that compute capability is about virtual machines running in the cloud, and everything from really cost-effective commodity compute through general purpose, through price performance type machines. So really there are different series of machines that we can deploy here. Everything from a small single virtual CPU virtual machine up to huge 32 core 448 gig of RAM behemoths. And actually, it changes all the time. So there's new specifications coming out, version 2s of VA series machines, for instance, and a new GPU-enabled N-series virtual machines as well. So for certain compute workloads where using the graphics chip is actually a really performant way of working. On the storage side of things, we've got standard and premium, so SSD-backed options. And the important thing to note about storage is that you pay as you grow. So whereas traditionally you'd go out and buy a SAN and you'd fill it up with a load of disks and you needed to pay for all of that capacity whether you were using it or not, with Azure you just pay for what you use. Certainly in the case of standard storage, it's slightly different for premium. And what that means is that you've got the ability to host blobs, so for object storage, to provide table storage, which is a NoSQL store, to provide queues for messaging at scale between application services, and files for SMB access to Azure storage. And all of that is available there in a way that can grow with your needs, and that's one of the key ways that you can save money by starting to consume services from Azure rather than upgrading your SAN next time it comes up for renewal. We've also got cool storage for archival, so that's a higher latency storage with a lower price attached to it. And one thing I haven't mentioned is the way that storage is replicated around within data centers and beyond data centers between regions, but let's say there are multiple options there, from local replicated storage through to geo-replicated storage. And it's more than we have time to go into in this short overview, but there are options there. Then on the networking side of things, really we can provide a private network in the cloud. You have an isolated, secure environment for your applications to run. You bring your own IP addresses and DNS servers, and you define your own subnets. And then we can connect to that securely as well. So if I move on to the next slide, actually, we'll look specifically at connectivity. We've really got 3 ways of doing that. We can either have, might have virtual machines that are exposed directly to the internet and then secured with network security groups, which are kind of like an access control list, or we can, and that works in some basic scenarios, but more likely, what you're going to do is you're going to build out hybrid infrastructure. You're going to extend your network to the cloud and have site-to-site or point-to-site IPsec secured VPN connections. And then that goes all the way up to having dedicated connections to Azure using a service called ExpressRoute, which allows a private connection with redundancy built in, working with your communications provider up to 10 gigabits per second, low latency, high security, and indeed in government environments, it's not just ExpressRoute, there's now connectivity to the public services network and also to M3 for the NHS. So there are options there for private connections into the Microsoft cloud. So in the same way that I talked to you earlier about software as a service on the right-hand side and on-premises on the left, and said you want to start at the right and move back. What about if you're building applications? Well, Microsoft as a platform company built and is continuing to build services that give customers the resources that they need to be agile and productive. But for each new workload, start at the top of the stack I'm about to show you and say, well, why can't I run it on this service? And if you can't run it at the top level, then move down to the next one, and then the next, and the next. But ultimately, what you're looking for is agility. And you get that agility according to the way that you architect your applications. So we have Azure Functions. And functions are what some people refer to as serverless computing. And of course, there's a server. It's got to run somewhere. But you don't care about that server. It's as close to serverless as we can get with current technology. A function exists for as long as it takes to take an input, which might be fired up on a trigger, to perform some compute on that, and to provide an output. And then that function's not there anymore. And new functions are fired on demand as they're needed to run code. We've got application services. So that could be web apps, mobile apps, APIs, or it could be logic apps, which provide some workflow. That again, when we start writing loosely coupled service components, then different components start to fit together. We've got a service fabric, and the service fabric is actually what Azure itself runs on, but that's available as a service for other applications to be built on top of. And then fairly recent addition to Azure is containers. Microsoft has adopted some of the open source technologies, so there's Docker, but I believe there's also support now for Kubernetes and Mesosphere as well. There's a number of options around containerization. And if you're not familiar with containerization, really it's kind of like the next generation of virtualization, but we're chunking things up into much smaller containers and running hundreds on a single machine. We've got a virtual machine scale set. That's really the idea of taking a reference and being able to scale out and scale back in very quickly to deal with demands, potentially hundreds of identical machines providing a web farm for a large application, but managed as one. And then at the bottom, virtual machines, which is something that most of us are familiar with. We've been working with for a number of years now, and so I probably don't need to say too much about that. Now that's supported by Azure Resource Manager, which is as I mentioned earlier, has templates for us to deploy these resources. And there's a marketplace as well where we can take pre-configured resources and we can apply them. So I worked on a customer project last year where we needed firewall services, and we used Barracuda firewalls that were bought in from the Azure marketplace, configured, ready to go. We didn't need the skills in the Barracuda devices. It was pre-built for us. We just needed to get those configured, and then they were able to provide some additional security within our environment. And that's just one example. There are many examples in the marketplace. The whole point about this slide is that we have agility at the top and we have control at the bottom. And you're looking to provide the to find the sweet spot for your application on that stack. And it will be different for different applications. What we do is we group those top 5 together and we call them platform as a service or advanced workloads, and that's what Azure PaaS is about. Now, time ticks on, but one point I want to make about the Microsoft Cloud is there is a hybrid philosophy. So some vendors will tell you that hybrid is just the bridge to the cloud, and ultimately everything's going to run in the public cloud. Well, depending on which analyst reports you read, the death of on-premises solutions has been greatly exaggerated. We still have them. We still have an investment, and we still need to use those technologies and those assets for a number of years to come. So the advantage that we get with the Microsoft Cloud is that it's a single ecosystem. We can do unified application development, whether that's running on-premises in our enterprise cloud, and you'll notice I don't use the word private cloud because I don't believe in it. Most people's private clouds are really just hosted virtual infrastructure. And we have cloud service providers on the right there. And the whole point here is that it's managed as one. So we have common management tools, we have common development tools, and it really doesn't matter whether we're running on-premises or in the cloud. That shouldn't matter to us, and we're able to move workloads accordingly. And that will really come to fruition later this year with something called Azure Stack, which is going to allow us to actually run a little mini Azure inside our data centers. Now, that is an enterprise solution and probably only suitable for our largest customers, but it is a capability. And even if you're not running Azure Stack, you can be using System Center, you can be using Windows Server, you can be using Linux, to be honest, and you can still manage it as one within the Microsoft Cloud. Now, identity is a key consideration when moving to cloud. And again, this falls into this hybrid model. So we live in a virtual world where software is mingled across all sorts of systems, some on premises, some in the cloud, and you know, we have a potential for identity management to get really quite messy with lots of usernames and passwords and different complexity for different systems. We've also got people bringing their own applications, whether you like it or not. People are using Dropbox, Evernote, etc. And more often than not, that's without IT supervision. Decisions are made by line of business, and the governance isn't always there. And then we need standards. We need open standards to help us to drive interoperability. And the way that we do this is about having a tight identity ecosystem, and Azure Active Directory is a product which is able to act as an identity broker. And really, identity is the new control plane. It's all about a simple connection, about self-service, single sign-on, whether that's on-premises or to one of thousands of cloud services. So I'm going to use this example here, which has been, it's not mine, it's been used with permission, but of Superman. You know, Superman has a number of identities. He's Clark Kent, and that's what he's known as at the Daily Planet, but he's Superman on Facebook, and he's been Superboy 1977 on Gmail ever since he registered it in high school. And then he's got another identity that he uses to access secure systems, his Kryptonian crystallized cave. The point is, we've got a fragmented identity system here, multiple accounts, and it generates the behavior for using easy to remember passwords, and that ultimately is a security risk. So what if you can bring it all together into one identity, and you can access all of those services using that single identity? And that's where Azure Active Directory fits in. Back to this point, identity is the new control plane. You control people's identity, you control what they access. So it's no longer about securing devices and operating systems. We're talking here about securing applications and data, and we do that through identity. Now, the clock's ticking, so I'm going to move on to the next of those four areas I was going to talk about in Azure, which is about data and intelligence. So this is about powering decisions and applications with insights. And according to one IDC report, there's a $1.8 trillion opportunity in latent data. That's data that doesn't have any business intelligence around it. So I want to talk to you about how some of the advanced workloads in Azure will help to unlock that data. So if we build this out, there are really three trends driving innovation in this area. We're seeing the Internet of Things and the number of connected devices, which is exploding dramatically. But what that's doing is providing a lot of data, which can be used to fuel insight. And we're seeing more data that's actually being born digitally. We're seeing cloud mature to a point where the elasticity that it can give us, so the ability to stretch, means that we can apply greater computational resource than we could ever afford to do ourselves. So machine learning, for instance, is really, really expensive to do on your own infrastructure. But if you can use somebody else's, and there really are only a handful of people in the world who have the scale to provide you with this, then you have opportunities within your business to do things that would previously not been available. And then we've got improved algorithms. We've got the ability to do more with artificial intelligence, to apply machine learning techniques, so for example to speech or to vision, to take on more human characteristics, to do translation, to solve new problems. So there's a whole suite of products that Microsoft provides within Azure that help us with this, and we'll talk about that over the next few minutes. But it all comes down to data. Data is absolutely central to everything we do. And if you take some examples, it used to cost $100 million to map the human genome. Now you can do it for just under $1,000 and work out your propensity to succumb to certain diseases. And so much so that some United States have banned these tests because the information is too telling. It's kind of like bad for your mental health to know the state of your physical health. Isn't that a paradox? Take something a little less depressing. We've got examples where Microsoft worked with Fujitsu, for example, to come up with something called the connected cow. And they worked out that cows walk more when they're fertile. So by putting a pedometer on a cow, they could monitor how active it was, and therefore what the likelihood of success was for artificial insemination and a successful pregnancy and a calf being born. And there are other examples. Similar thinking can be applied elsewhere. So ThyssenKrupp, who are an elevator company, they moved beyond just predictive maintenance on their own lifts to try and understand when a part might soon need replacing, to the point where they're selling that platform back to their competitors. So it comes back to this point I made earlier about every company becomes a software company, looking for new value, new business models. There's also examples with connected coffee. Dow Egberts using machine learning to understand soil composition and select the beans and their blends. And really, the point is that data is what's driving all of this. It's a bit hackneyed, but people refer to data as the new oil or the new electricity or the fourth industrial revolution. But if you put that data on a Microsoft platform, and then you can build the application services and tools around it and keep them close to the data. Now, one way to collect data is the Internet of Things. And IoT's really reached an inflection point. So we now have cost-effective hardware. The connectivity is there that we need. The state of the art has matured. I mean, this stuff's really affordable even for consumers. So, there are opportunities for business to exploit this as well. The potential savings that coming out of the new models that we drive out using the IoT can fuel investment, and then that analysis enables new business. So Microsoft has something called the IoT Suite, which is a suite of Azure services in a bundle which allow you to capture, ingest, and analyze data, to drive out a workflow, to take some action, to visualize that data, provide information, and there are also embedded solutions for the most common use cases, which are remote monitoring and predictive maintenance. So ultimately what we're looking at is outcomes here, and you can see 4 different outcomes on the right there about gaining insight and agility, building a competitive edge, opening new business opportunities, and redefining customer services. But ultimately, customers are moving into this in a big way. In one recent survey, 73% of the companies surveyed were active in Internet of Things, and 60% of those were looking to use it to grow revenue and profits, and half were looking for a reduction in downtime by using predictive maintenance. Ultimately, it's about process improvement and new business models, connecting and scaling, connecting devices of a number of platforms. It really doesn't matter what the operating system is there. It's providing some data. It's providing a stream that we can then analyze and act on we can do some analytics, we can apply some rules and actions, we can visualize, and ultimately we use that to transform our business processes. And again, you'll notice that it's not just the Microsoft world there. You see the really big middleware players and that we can integrate with that. So in this, which I refer to as the stagecoach bus slide because of the colours on it, what we're looking at is how we get from data to decisions and ultimately to actions. And in the past, we've tended to look in the rearview mirror. What we need is something more real-time and to start to look forwards, to start to get to recommendations and automated actions. So we capture data, we put it in Azure, we store it, we analyze it, and we drive an outcome. So instead of static reports of what happened and interactive dashboards of why did it happen, we start to talk about predictions of what will happen. And beyond that, recommendations of what should I do, which will either support a decision or allow a decision to be automated and some action to actually be taken. And obviously, the business cases will drive out what's appropriate action. You don't always want things to happen automatically, but there are times when you absolutely do. And this is where machine learning is king. And that's where the Cortana Intelligence Suite comes in. So these next couple of slides are lifted directly from Microsoft, but you can see on the left we've got data sources, applications, we've got sensors. Pushing into Cortana, which is really the cloud services that provide that intelligence, and then driving out to be able to take actions, whether those are people-based, application-based, or about automated systems. When we look at that in terms of Azure services, there are some information management services, there's things we can do around big data, there's the machine learning and analytics side of things, and there's the intelligence side of things, as well as using Power BI for dashboards and visualizations. So really what we're looking at is defining new experiences, and this is an example of a different way of ordering pizza. And you might think ordering pizza is probably the least important thing in the world, and particularly with an obesity crisis, but it seems to be an example that's used a lot. And this guy Jeremy, he's ordering a pizza, and the bot is able to reply and say, yeah, do you want your usual? No, I've bought a pepperoni, I'd like to try something new. Well, how about these options? Well, that works. Yeah, I'll go for option 3. Shall I send it to you at home? No, I'm working late in the office. Could you send it to me here, please? That type of thing is a totally new experience. Perhaps in more business-centric views, we can use things like HoloLens in car design, or for trainee doctors learning how to operate on people. Ultimately, we take data, we mash it up, we provide augmented reality, and we're trying to unlock this data that I was talking about that's previously inaccessible to us. I think the best example I can give, and I really want to talk about this just very quickly, is about Rolls-Royce. So Rolls-Royce, not the car manufacturer, the jet engine manufacturer, used to sell engines to airlines, but in the airline industry, time very literally is money. You want your planes to be in the sky for as long as is possible. So what Rolls-Royce have done is they've worked with Microsoft to drive out a suite of applications which allow them to predict when parts are approaching end of life. Obviously, you do not want them to fail in an airline environment. But you get an engineer and a part to be waiting for that plane when it arrives at its destination, to be able to change the part, to be able to service and get that plane back in the sky with no downtime to the airline. And instead of selling jet engines, Rolls-Royce is now selling services based on flight hours. Flight hours as a service. And there's lots of reference materials on a Microsoft website. I'm happy to point people to videos about this, but it gives you an example of some of the new experiences that we can drive out with data and insight. Because ultimately it comes back down to that digital transformation message, and the message that Satya was giving in the slide way back at the start of my visual introduction, which is transforming products, engaging customers, optimizing operations, and empowering employees. And we do that through systems of intelligence. Now, it's 10 to the hour. I've still got 2 areas to talk about, but the good news for you is they're quite quick ones. I'm going to talk about openness and flexibility, or building freely and deploying anywhere. And it might surprise people to learn that over a third of virtual machines running in Azure are running Linux. Last September, Microsoft was reported as the largest, or at least the most prolific, open source contributor at GitHub. And in November 16, Microsoft joined the Linux Foundation. Now, a few years ago, that we would never have expected to see that, but that just shows you the way that Microsoft is taking the open source world very, very serious. And we live in a world of heterogeneity now. It's about cross-platform services. It's no longer just about Windows. So, if you really want to illustrate that, it comes right from the very top. And this is a quote from Scott Guthrie, who runs Microsoft Cloud and Enterprise Group. And as a cloud platform company, we aim to help developers achieve more using the platforms and languages they know. When I look at this slide, I can't actually tell you what all of these icons are. I know they're all open source products. I recognize some of them. I've even used some of them. But it gives you a real understanding that Microsoft do open source, and it really doesn't matter in Azure whether you're doing Windows or Linux or .NET or Ruby on Rails or Node.js. And you can find out more at open.microsoft.com. Now, moving on to talk about trust. This is all about protecting your business and your data. So it all comes down to security, privacy, control, and transparency. There's three key areas there I want to talk about a little bit: security and privacy, shared responsibility, and then some of the compliance and regulatory elements. So from a security perspective, Microsoft is the biggest security company you have never heard of. Now that sounds a bit weird. Of course you've heard of Microsoft, but do you think of them as a security provider? Well, they spend over $1 billion every year on research and development in security. That's absolutely enormous. And, really, we start to see the significance of that when we start to look at some of the metrics attached. So 300 billion user authentications each month, 20 million SQL database hours, and you can read the bullets just as well as I can, but the point is that Microsoft has some absolutely phenomenal numbers here which give them a unique perspective to help them to recognize threats, help them to take action on those threats. You need depth and breadth in order to address the security challenges today, and Microsoft has that. So we then start to think about, great, well, Microsoft are able to use their intelligence and knowledge to keep services secure, and all the compliance that we'll talk about in a moment is about how they manage the people side of things and the actual operation of the service. But so I don't have to do anything then, do I? Unfortunately, you do. Ultimately, it's still your data, and you're still accountable for it. So I really recommend that you have a look at this white paper. It's not long, but it does go into a detail of where organizations need to be considering their own security and privacy when they're working in a cloud environment. And to be honest, it doesn't matter whose cloud environment you're talking about, this is equally relevant. So it's definitely worth having an internet search with your favorite search engine for that 14 cloud security controls for the UK cloud. And then this slide just shows us that Microsoft has the most comprehensive compliance coverage of any cloud provider. They are very transparent about this, so you can go to something called the Azure Trust Center, and you can find more information there about security, privacy, transparency, and compliance, the way that they provide service to customers and the way that they secure our data. But you can see there are a whole bunch of compliance certifications, and you think, yeah, great, well, that's global. I'm not that bothered about the Canadian privacy laws, for example. Well, no, you might not be. The ones that we're generally most interested are the ones I've highlighted here. So if we look at EU model clauses, that's about the transfer of personal data. There's ISO standards there. 22301 is about business continuity. 27001 is security management. 27017 and 18 are cloud security and cloud privacy. There's PCI DSS for card industry payments, and there's UKG Cloud, the digital marketplace. UK government is quite happy putting its data on the Microsoft Cloud. That probably tells you something. So, to summarise Azure, I talked about 4 areas. I talked about application innovation and about using the cloud to innovate in ways that we wouldn't be able to, that we don't have the resources to be able to invest on premises. I talked about data intelligence, about using the power of SQL in the cloud, and about other services that allow us to democratize AI, and some of the things that opens up to us with machine learning and new models. I talked about openness and flexibility, the fact that it's not just about Microsoft products and services here. And I've talked about trust. Really, if I needed to talk about the benefits of Azure from a digital transformation perspective, there's 8 things here that it comes down to. And I've mentioned hyperscale a few times. I keep talking about agility and about being able to innovate more often. But those are the things that will help you to actually drive some real business value out of adopting cloud services. But specifically, Azure is, if you want to learn 3, or you want to take 3 things away from this presentation, Azure is hyperscale, it's enterprise proven, and it's hybrid. And I put a question mark on there, but I suggest that should be an exclamation mark. Is it the platform for your digital transformation? So, just want to wrap up by talking about how visual might be able to help your business. And I went through the company overview earlier, but just a little bit more detail around what it is that we can offer in terms of advisory services, implementation services, and managed services. And that's everything from helping to define a strategy through enterprise architecture, program and project management, and then the change management and supporting business cases and supporting process change. We can then help you to implement technology right through from design and planning through the build and test to deployment. And then we've got managed services from proactive support and early life engagement to help you over a transition from an old world to a new, perhaps enhancing your existing support capability, but also right through to being able to provide, to manage your workload and ultimately to provide full managed services. And the important thing is we do this across the whole Microsoft stack. Not many partners can say that. Many partners are specialists in a particular area. We have breadth as well as depth. So my last slide is to talk about the Cloud Architect Roadshow. So this year, our business group architects are going to be travelling the length and breadth of the UK and to help organisations understand how the cloud can transform their business. So not just here at Visual in Stafford, but also visiting some of the sites where we've got Visual Academies in colleges to hold events closer to customers. So you can come along and spend some time with us, learning more about the cloud, the Microsoft Cloud, and then having a one-to-one session with an architect to understand a bit more about how this could be applied to your business. So if you'd like to join us, the first one of these is next week. It's January the 31st in Stafford. We've got more events being scheduled for February and March that you can register for, and there will be more as the year goes on. So book early. Spaces are limited. Those one-to-one sessions do make it quite limiting. We're trying to make this quite an intimate type event, but this Cloud Architect Roadshow is something that we're investing in to do more of this. So you can hear more about Azure, an expanded version of this presentation I've given today. You can also hear about Office 365, Dynamics 365, how it all comes together, and of course those one-to-one sessions, so we can actually start to put some of that into context for your business. That's all of my talking for this session. I just want to say thank you for listening. And Molly, have we had any questions come through on this call?
We haven't in the IM window so far.
Okay. Well, if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out, inquiries@ridgel.com, or there's various contact details on our website. What I might just do, just in case anybody wants to type any questions into the Q&A window in Skype at the moment, just want to show a couple of extra resources that you might be interested in. This is the website page that I looked at with the Azure solutions, and you'll see here that there are various things that you can go through and you can click and understand about how Azure might help you in these different areas. This is the website about Microsoft and open source. Again, great place to go and find out what Microsoft is doing in that world. So, here we go, hybrid cloud monitoring using Microsoft Operations Management Suite. So, whether that's monitoring Microsoft services or monitoring open source services. And then there's this interactive platform site that it's kind of a useful way to find out about some of the Azure services. You can click on one of these and you get an expanding window there, which will then direct you to things like an overview and pricing and documentation and service levels that you can expect. So that's a good thing to know about as well. So no, I still don't see any more questions, so I'm going to assume that's it for this session, and thank you everybody for listening.